they have the tool that you need to make a movie right here. And then you could go across the street or right across the walkway, and then there's literally a theater where you could watch that movie like right next to it. That's also sort of the trap of content creation, is that there is no limit. Like
Yeah.
you can make 1 million videos a year, or you can make 3 banger videos a year. One of the secret nuggets that I've tried to teach filmmakers is that
Hello, I'm Dustin, PolyInnovator. Today I'm welcoming actually Brandon Washington to the PolyTools Creator Spotlight. He is a videographer, editor, video creator coach, filmmaker, founder of Bwash Media, and teller of brand stories. Thank you for joining me on this show for content creators.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me.
I change up the intro every single time. I'm still experimenting with that, and I don't mind getting a little bit meta and saying that out loud, because every time I do the intro, I feel like I mess myself up on something. But I appreciate you being here for sure. And the way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Ooh, something that nobody knows. That's probably pretty tough for most creators because we put so much of ourselves out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my diehard fans will know that like I'm a huge baseball fan, and primarily because my oldest son plays baseball. And so like I love watching baseball now, and more importantly, watching him. And so like whenever it comes to like most things, I throw in like baseball and sports analogies because I had to learn how to coach for his team for a long time. Now I'm just a dad on the sidelines. But yeah, so I really love baseball. That's something that probably most people don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know that myself. In fact, I didn't even know you had kids when I first met you in person. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I like this guy's super young, and he's successful. And then like I saw on like your TikTok, for example, you have kids. I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize he was a dad. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, that's like my favorite job. That's by far my favorite job, being a dad. I got 2 boys, Andre and Jensen. They watch everything I put out, so shout out to them because I'm sure they'll see this at some point. They're my biggest fans, and I'm their biggest fan. So
It's fantastic. On the other show I do, where I talk to people who are polymathic and multidisciplinary, oftentimes when I get a parent who's very adamant about parenting and like being involved in their kids' lives, that we even make that a topic of the episode, because it's all about your different skills that you have to have. So you might be a filmmaker, you might also be a content creator, but you're also a dad. And being a dad, being a parent is obviously a skill too.
yeah, no, it definitely is a skill. I think anything that you put hard work into eventually becomes a skill.
Yeah.
But yeah, being a dad for me is like the best thing about my life. And so, yeah, I love it. So yeah, I could totally hijack this entire thing and talk about my kids the entire time. I won't do that because your audience won't care. But yeah, dude, being a dad is awesome.
Well, I mean, balancing content creation and being a dad is a topic that people could learn from. I feel like every single one of these episodes generally has multiple lessons that people can learn from, but there's oftentimes something unique that will appeal to somebody. And I think that like my last interview was about a gaming content creator, and learning from the gaming content world can help a lot of podcast world. So for example, there's a big YouTuber named Dream who does Minecraft videos, and he had a style of video that eventually seeped into the podcast world, where he did 3 highlights in the beginning and would just like, okay, I'm about to die from a zombie, or I fell really hard and I only have 1 heart left. Very suspenseful moments, trying to capture that attention at the front of the long form video. And his videos were like an hour long too. And I realized I could do that with the podcast. Take highlights of what if Brandon is going to say something really cool later on, let's highlight that, put that towards the front of the video, and then have like 3 of those highlights to capture that attention. And eventually I saw bigger channels do that as well. And I just thought like something like that could happen with the parenting too. Like maybe you have a lesson where it's like, there's a whole debate whether or not you want your kids to be on social media at a young age or something like that. I had a friend who has his kids actually on there making content, like face off for the most part, but making like little Lego stop motion stuff, because everyone's going to be content creator at some point. I think that's kind of a futurism kind of thing we could talk about, but yeah, I guess I'll stop rambling. I just figured like that's kind of interesting angle.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with everything you've said so far. I mean, you definitely can learn from other industries. That's actually like one of the secret nuggets that I've tried to teach filmmakers, is that like when I started my journey in filmmaking, I shot a lot of real estate, but like I didn't look at what other real estate videographers were doing. I was actually learning from shooting other things, like because I also shoot like music festivals or commercials or whatever. And so I would just take those things and bring them to real estate as well. And that's basically the exact same thing that you're talking about, where it's like just because something's not your niche or your industry doesn't mean you can't learn from it. There's normally tons of things that you can adopt and bring in. And a lot of the times that's actually what helps you stand out even more within your niche, is that you're bringing something that to the people in your niche seems new and seems different. But if you go just step outside that realm, that's actually pretty common, and that's what everybody's doing. So,
Yeah.
and I'm even doing that on my channel now. So yeah.
I love that. And just even you having being on here, I've had, some directors or filmmakers on the show for the most part, but having someone of your skill level in filmmaking and talking about video production, that's going to give a unique angle for the audience to learn from. My last guest was a gamer. The guest before that could have been like a repurposing person. Each guest, I'm trying to have this dynamic because content creation world is so vast and so wide, but a lot of these creator interview shows focus purely on the YouTubers or purely on the podcasters. They don't get wide enough and try to take that holistic approach.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
What got you started as a content creator, Brandon?
So the content creation specifically for me was more of a creative outlet. So as I
Mhm.
mentioned before, my background was shooting real estate, which, you know, was great at the time. Like it paid the bills, but honestly, it was very boring. Like shooting a bunch of empty houses didn't really give me any like internal fulfillment. And
Yeah.
so I was like, I got to go find something. And, I stumbled across YouTube. I think like a lot of filmmakers, we saw other filmmaking channels like DSLR Video Shooter or Peter McKinnon or YC Imaging. And I was like, oh, I want to, step into that space a little bit. I like gear, I like cameras. I'd love to make some content in that world. And for me, that was like initially why I started on YouTube, was just for creative expression. Like I just wanted to figure out a place where I could kind of make whatever I wanna make, not be tied down or bound by, like, the requests of clients, but
Mhm.
also I could try new things that I knew would be hard to, like, convince my clients to let me do. Like, one thing, like so I never went to film school. I'm not, like, professionally I'm self-taught in all of this. I wasn't, like, professionally trained, but I knew, like, when I was starting, I was like, "Oh, man, I wish I could, like, light my scenes better." But, like,
Mhm.
to ask somebody to, like, "Hey, I'm gonna bring out lights, and I'm gonna spend 2 hours trying to figure out," because back then there weren't like lighting tutorials like there are now. There's
Mhm.
like millions of them, but back then we didn't have it. So I was like, okay, I need like 2 hours to play around with this. I basically did that on YouTube. And then I used the comment section as a place to get feedback on if my lighting was good or not. And so that was something that was like really for me, was like YouTube was just that creative outlet, but it was also a place for me to like learn, try new things, and then let the comments sort of help me hone my skills a little bit and get a little bit better.
I love how you were also taking advantage of the comments and getting that feedback, allowing that first off the community to build, but on top of that too, you get that external perspective because sure you could experiment yourself, but by having someone else help you refine the technique, that's really helpful as well.
I think you need to be open to feedback on anything you do. I mean, that's one of the things, like, even now, like, I technically do content creation full time, but I still do client work and I still pursue like passion projects. But like, I like doing client work because it allows me to let somebody else have a little bit of a say in the final product. And I can learn from that. I feel like sometimes as creators, we can get caught in our own head and we think we know what's best. We think we know what the audience is going to like, but actually listening to them, they can help you really fine tune, especially when it comes to like skills, like
Mhm.
if I think I'm lighting something right and somebody in the comments, because like YouTube allows you literally to reach the world with every single upload, somebody in a whole nother country or state or, city, or even maybe just right down the street from me can actually add, like, give me that little nugget that I missed that could absolutely take my creativity to the next level and just
Mhm.
improve my skill. And you kind of get that for free. Like YouTube is a free platform. You can upload your
Yeah.
videos for free. People give you feedback for free. Like it's better than going to school where you have to spend a bunch of money to learn something and then you're graded on a grade scale of how good you were, but you're not actually getting real world feedback. And for me, that's what YouTube did for me.
You're definitely going into the whole feedback angle. My brain kept thinking putting in the reps angle, for example. So every time you did a client gig and that kind of project, those would be fewer and far in between than what you could do solo. Because what you could do solo, you could choose the time length elapsed for how long that project will be, so you can get more reps in during that cross-contamination process, because you're just doing clients. You might do 8 in a year, maybe 20 in a year. I don't know what the actual scale is, but there's a limit basically. But with the solo stuff, you can do 50 in a year, and so you can put those reps in a lot quicker and learn from your mistakes a lot quicker.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true, especially with YouTube. Like, you could take the smallest little idea and turn that into a video. Like, if you just want
Mhm.
to try one random lighting setup or test a microphone, that becomes a YouTube video. And like I said, you get the feedback, you get the reps, and you can put in as many reps as you want. That's the thing I like about content creation. That's also sort of the trap of content creation,
Mm.
is that there is no limit. Like,
Yeah.
you can make a million videos a year, or you can make 3 banger videos a year, and, like, the gap in between that is vast, you know what I mean? So, like, trying to figure out, like, where that healthy balance comes in can be very tough, especially early on, but
Mhm.
also knowing that, like, if you have the time and you can keep putting in the work, it's normally allows you to be more successful.
It's also really interesting too. Some creators struggle with having enough ideas. I definitely never had that issue when it came to that because I would always end up having more ideas come from the videos I make. Like, oh, that was kind of cool, but I'd rather do it this way, or maybe I can try this new thing or something like that.
Yeah, ideation is definitely a huge part of the creative process. I think now I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Like, coming up with ideas has never been difficult for me. You know, obviously there's a skill to that, and some of that
Mhm.
is just, like, always looking for inspiration and having that mindset ready. I think now more so my struggle comes with is this a good enough idea? And, like, that's where I find myself, like, spending most of my time in the ideation process is like, okay, this is an idea, but is it worth a full video? And are people gonna resonate with it? And so those are the things that I try to spend a lot of my time working on.
I definitely like the idea too of prioritization, because some ideas you want to just cut out. Like there's the whole Eisenhower matrix where is it decent? Well, maybe keep it for later. Is it good? Then do it. If it's not good, then get rid of it, cut it out. And that's a good way of, filtering out whether or not you should be doing that idea. But I also kind of like the idea of just like there's not really an opportunity cost. You don't have to do one or the other. You just do one now and do the other one down the line. And while there is kind of some of an opportunity cost in time, but sometimes it's a matter of just patience.
Yeah, and sometimes those ideas that are not great today, if you let them marinate for a little while, they
Mhm.
become much better ideas for the future.
Out of the three pillar content, you seem to prefer video content very much so. So why does that resonate with you so deeply?
I mean, I think personally, it has a lot to do with just like my upbringing. Like,
Mhm.
as a kid, me and my grandmother, we actually used to go to the movies a lot. I have family here in Houston where I live, and then my dad and his entire side of the family is in Los Angeles. And as a kid, my grandmother used to take me to the Grove, which is like this like outdoor shopping area. It's like amazing, but they have an amazing theater there, or at least they did when I was a kid. It's maybe not as nice now.
Mhm.
But it was like this, like, grand theater. It looked like the opera, like, it was red carpets and stairs, and it was just, like, this amazing place, and she used to take me there to go to the movies, and then right across the walkway from the theater is an Apple store, and so I would go to the movies, and then I'd go into the Apple store, and I would see the laptops, and like I see the editing software, and like my mind was always like, oh my goodness, like they have the tool that you need to make a movie right here. And then you could go across the street or right across the walkway, and then there's literally a theater where you could watch that movie like right next to it. And I think just as a kid, like the idea of making movies, like I went to Universal Studios and I did the whole tour and the back lot, and they showed how movies were made. And then obviously as a kid continuing to grow up, when DVDs came out, I was the kid who wouldn't even watch the movie. I would just watch the behind the scenes, the making process. Like, that was always just really interesting to me. And so, like, the world of video has always just spoke to my heart. I think that you can tell amazing stories through video. I think you can connect with people in a different way. And then it also probably doesn't help that I'm like super dyslexic. And
Mm.
so reading has never been a big thing for me. So, like, books out the window. Like, I'll listen to it, but like movies and video for me always was like the key. And yeah, that's just I've always loved it.
Well, and it's interesting too because we were talking about before the call podcasting, and it's interesting about the whole audio world because you can listen to books, but reading obviously just is not too comfortable for you, and it's just one of those things that's too much of a struggle. And obviously, writing would be kind of the same way. But you started a podcast recently. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, if you know me personally, you know I like to talk.
Really?
I get inspired and then I will talk your ear off. But
Mhm,
also I feel like, you know, with most conversations, like even you and I when we started this, like when you first start the conversation, it's kind of like, oh, we're kind of figuring things out, kind of figuring out how we're gonna talk to each other. But then after about that like 10 to 15-minute mark, the conversation just starts to flow
mhm,
and you can really get into the weeds. And for me, podcasting was, you know, we podcast, but we also live stream our podcast because I wanted to be able to have more of a conversation, not only with my guests or with my co-host Jarrell, who does the podcast with me, but also with the audience. It allows us to talk through things
mhm,
because there have been plenty of times on our live stream. So we live stream our podcast, and there have been plenty of times where we'll be in the middle of a conversation and I'll make a statement. I'll say, "Oh, I feel this way about something." And then the audience through chat will add in their elements. Jarrell will tell his elements, and then my thoughts will change. And then I can organically be like, yeah, you know what? Actually, I think I actually agree with you now. And I can
mhm,
change my stance in real time. And I like that fact. And I like that about podcasting that you can do that versus like with a YouTube video, sometimes there's information that's just so finite. Like once you
mhm.
put up the video, it's like your opinion is finite. And there have been plenty of times where I'll like make a video, I'll upload the video, a day or two will go by, and then I'll be like, I'll read some of the comments. I'll be like, oh man, I really don't feel that way anymore. But unfortunately, the video is already up and the perception is already out there. And so for me, podcasting just kind of allowed me to have a little bit more elongated conversations leaning into one of my strengths, which is that I have the ability to on the fly just talk about a subject.
Mhm.
I don't feel uncomfortable talking, especially into a microphone. And then you also can kind of forget about the camera for a little bit and just sort of like have a conversation.
Like right now, I'm looking at the camera because that's what my habit does. Basically, I naturally gravitate down towards the little pinhole. But I'm listening to you, right? I wanted to make sure that when you as a guest are here on the show, you may be looking at me right now on the screen. Right now, I think you're looking at the camera. I don't know if you have a teleprompter that makes it easier to do both at the same time, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
that's
gonna
what it
tell
is.
you that's the secret, bro. I switched to a teleprompter. Actually, I have the Elgato teleprompter.
I was
I
just
told
about to
you.
ask.
Yeah, I got the Elgato teleprompter, and that allows me to look at you and also have a conversation because that's
Mhm.
what I like to do. Like I like to look at people when I'm talking to them. I know that can be uncomfortable for some, but you know that's just a little easier for me.
There's also this psychological thing where I feel like some people get a little bit more offended if you're not actually looking at them like directly. And so there's this natural psychological response. One thing you're mentioning too that I think is really kind of important to delve into is the talking before the call. So the pre-show is the show, as Lewis House says. And so I try to do a decent amount of research. At least on this show, I do a little bit, if not a mild amount. But on the other show, since it's very much so about your different disciplines, I have to do a lot of different research for it. So I want to make sure I do a lot of preparation. I look at all your social profiles for both shows and try to get a like holistic response. But that doesn't matter unless we actually have a good rapport when we're talking. And so when we first came on the call, we were figuring out the tech stuff and we're trying to see like, hey, how's it been since I last saw you? But you and I hadn't had as much conversations really. I think maybe once or twice for the most part before this. Whereas like when I had James Hicks on, I had talked to him a handful of times already. And so we had
Hmm.
to build up that kind of rapport a little bit. And so sometimes when it comes to these shows, we jump right in, we talk, and we build up the rapport for the first few minutes. But sometimes we'll talk before the recording and get that kind of steam momentum going, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think I mean, especially with my podcast, I do that. It's a guest by guest basis, like you were saying. Like
Yeah.
I tend to bring on people that I already have relationships with on my podcast. I find that it's easier. Our podcast is very different than most podcasts. Like, it's
Hmm.
really not just like two people talking. Like, a lot of times, like our podcast, we look at it more as like a show.
Yeah.
It's literally called the Uncensored Show. Uncensored is a play on word because we're a filmmaking group, and you know we talk about sensors, camera sensors, and we even spell it uncensored like a camera sensor. But we play games, we have different talking points, you know, we'll play games with our guests and compete against them. We laugh, we cut jokes, talk about rumors, all that kind of stuff. It's very lighthearted. But I do believe what you're saying, that like before the show and even at the beginning of the show as the host, it is your job to sort of set the tone.
Mhm.
And I think that's really, really important because it's good for the audience, but it's also good for the guests. So they know sort of what to expect in this show. And also for your audience sake, it kind of, if it's their first time watching, it sort of like allows them to understand what they're about to get involved with and what they're about to commit to consuming. But then I
Mhm.
also think that when it comes to like a repeat viewer, it allows them to realize like, okay, the last episode I saw wasn't a fluke. This is the same guy. This is the same show. And this is what I'm excited to tune in for.
I love that. And just for example, the structure of this show is pretty much similar to my Polycast as well. We just do like a quick little talking intro. I don't like making a separate video intro like some podcasts do. I just quickly go over what your skills are and like who you are, like you're a filmmaker, video producer, that kind of thing. And that way people know who you are and we can get into that. And then I have the icebreaker question, which is the same for both shows. Share something about yourself that no one knows about you. Out of the 150 interviews I've done, I think one person actually got kind of caught off guard by that so much I had to cut it out. But for the most part, it makes everything else after that easier because once you get past that initial hurdle, everything else just kind of flows, and that's why I really like doing it. And then I have the history question. So in the other show I do is what was your mindset 5 years ago and how have you changed since then? And then this show is like what got you started as a content creator. And we might as well get into that as well for you. Like, what was your mindset 5 years ago too?
So for me, 5 years ago, shoot, I gotta think. 5 years ago, that's
Oh,
pre-COVID. Okay.
yeah.
So that puts a lot of things into perspective because COVID changed a lot for me. So I think 5 years ago, I wasn't sure if being a content creator was like a real thing. Like if
Mm,
I'm being fully transparent, like I wasn't making like any real money. I would say like, I was making a little bit here and there from like AdSense, which most creators will tell you you don't make a lot from AdSense, especially if you're not pulling, hundreds of thousands or millions of views. So for me, I was like, being a content creator is not like a real thing. Like, yeah, there are guys out there saying they're content creators making money, but like my mindset was that like they were really making money elsewhere and that content creation really wasn't it. So I was really torn in this like playing the role of saying like, oh, am I going to be a content creator or am I going to just do this video thing? And my mind never really like rationalized that I could actually do both. I just had to
mhm,
figure out how. And so it was more like a battle 5 years ago where it was like I would spend, 2 months really focusing on client work. And then when the client work would slow down, I would then spend like a month focusing on YouTube. And then the second client work like started to pick up again, I would drop YouTube like a bad habit and I would go run back over to client work.
mm,
And for me, it was like that was okay because I didn't really know what it meant to be a content creator. Wasn't really thinking of my audience like an audience. It was just random numbers out there that were supposedly consuming my content. It wasn't until I think 2018, 2019, so this is like around 5 years ago, that I went to NAB for the first time and actually met somebody who had consumed my content. And when they told me stuff about me that I didn't realize people really knew because I knew I was putting it on videos, but I didn't really
yeah.
know the people. It changed everything for me. Being able to look one of my viewers in the eyes really changed a lot. And it let me realize that even if I wasn't sure how the money stuff was going to work with being a content creator, I was having a real impact on some people's lives. And that was enough for me. So I think that's where I was about 5 years ago.
And see, that's why I love that question because even though I don't generally ask it on this show, it's one of those things where COVID did change a lot. It was an accelerant, but even prior to COVID too, like that's a different time. 2019 was definitely really interesting, especially in the YouTube world. I think we're around the time of adpocalypse and all those different
Hmm.
like situations that happened. And I'm not big enough to where I have an experience where I met one of my fans just yet in person, but I look forward to that. I look forward to experiencing what you just described. But I can definitely see why that would be so impactful to you and remind you like why you create content in the first place. Even big channels like Linus Tech Tips that have, 10, 15 million subscribers. I think they were saying how AdSense only makes up 15 to 22% of their income. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I mean, AdSense is not really why you should get into the game.
Yeah.
It's kinda like bonus or, I mean, it's just not why you should play. It's not the reason why you play the game. is not sustainable, and it won't keep you coming back when you have a rough week, you know? So, but yeah, no, definitely meeting somebody at NAB and like having faces now
Mhm.
to the subscribers, because like now we've even started hosting like in-person events. And so we had an event in March. We had over 120 some odd people there, and they were all there from my content, and that was just like absolutely insane to
Surreal.
experience. Yeah, it was it again, it's just moments like that that just remind me why we do it.
One thing, moving on to a different question here, I wanted to ask you, what tools do you use for content creation and repurposing? And since you're a big hardware guy, we can get into both digital and real stuff tools.
Specifically for like repurposing, so I'll speak for my podcast because that's where we do most of our repurposing.
Mhm.
So we currently use Opus to do all of our repurposing content. On our second channel that's specifically uncensored, so the podcast channel, pretty much all of our shorts that go up on there are specifically done through Opus, and we kind of are using it as a playground, if that makes sense. Like, so Opus is just so fast and easy that we can just take the episode, throw it in Opus, it'll spit out, you know, however many clips. We'll make some minor adjustments because sometimes it doesn't quite get the hook right, or it cuts the clip off a little too early, so we'll want to stretch it out a little bit. But we make those adjustments inside of Opus, and then we will schedule those out to just like to blast out on the channel. And what it does for us is not only does it help us grow because we're putting out more content, and not only does it bring in new audience and new eyeballs, but it also like informs us like what people actually care about, because we can put out so many shorts so fast that we can then go look at the data and see like, okay, what was the engagement like on this subject, or what were the comments like about this subject. And then what we'll do is and this is sort of new for us, but we'll figure out which shorts do really well on YouTube, which are like the outliers, and then we'll go grab those, and then my editor will actually polish that edit off a little bit more, and then we're gonna go blast those over on other social platforms.
Mm,
Where because I feel like on YouTube specifically, we can post 3, 4, 5 shorts a day and it won't hurt us. But we can't really do that on Instagram. We don't really do that on TikTok. So on those platforms, you can maybe post once, maybe twice a day without overly saturating your audience. And so we use YouTube as a playground to figure out what pieces of content naturally are resonating, what hooks are naturally resonating with people. And then we take the winners and then we go put those on other platforms.
there's so many different tangents we can go off of there. I will say, from my experience, TikTok, I feel like, is more like Twitter, where you can post as much as you want without really any repercussions, which is kind of funny how we had a difference in perspective there. I used to say you should post 5 to 10 times a day on TikTok in order to grow. Maybe it depends
I'm
on your
not
niche.
disagreeing with you. I'm
Oh,
not disagreeing
sure,
with you
sure,
at
sure.
all. I don't know TikTok well enough. So for us, like, cause like right now, we haven't like we've tried a couple posts on TikTok, but like none of them really take it off. TikTok is a completely different world to me,
Mhm.
and I don't know if our educational format works well on TikTok. Now, one thing, as I mentioned before, like on our podcast, we'll play games and
Mhm.
stuff with our guests. We are specifically, and this is new, so we haven't done it yet, but hopefully by the time this comes out, your viewers can maybe go check and tell me if I'm right or not. But what we try to do, what we're thinking about doing, is specifically taking clips from the games and
Mm,
posting that on TikTok, because TikTok is such a entertainment platform that we feel like the education won't quite work as well, but the entertaining elements of our podcast might work better. And so that's something that we're going to try, but we haven't
yeah.
tested it yet.
No, I love that. I love the idea. And again, I think we're both on the same page. It's just really fun to like talk about this. Ben Kaluza, who's my first guest on this show, he actually makes solely educational content on there and has done great. But it's also a matter of, I think both would work. I don't know if necessarily both would work on the same TikTok profile. I mean, I've been very adamant about not making multiple TikTok profiles. I'm not exactly sure why I'm so, you know, strong hard about that. But I would just kind of flood my TikTok with, even gaming content and podcast content. And it was kind of nice because the gaming content would increase engagement and then the podcast content would increase watch time. With the educational versus entertaining, I feel like both would do well. I almost wonder if maybe you should have two different TikToks for that. And when it comes to like how much times you should post, TikTok, I feel like you could do a lot and not have any repercussions. YouTube, I kind of agree with you on that, where it's like you really could still do a lot and not have really repercussions. I feel like it's still kind of medium though. Like you don't want to oversaturate your audience too much. But I feel like I've actually only been growing because I've posted so much. And in
Mhm.
Instagram, I actually had the opposite situation where I posted too much and I actually lost followers. But I think that's partially because my account was people I knew in real life. They don't really care or know about my content as much. And so it was one of those things
Mhm.
where there was that disconnect.
Yeah, I feel like I mean I've spoken with the people over at Instagram and they have made it very clear 3 to 5 posts a week. They don't want
Mm.
more than that. It becomes too difficult for their algorithm to even serve any more than
For
that for
reels or
you.
main feed?
Reels. Well,
Okay.
so scratch that. Posts in general.
Okay.
So when I spoke with Meta and I spoke with their business team, because I get a chance to speak with them like once every 3 months or something like that. They were like very adamant that like 3 to 5 posts a week, period. It doesn't
Mm.
matter if they're photos, carousels, reels, whatever. That's about where you want to stay limited, and then you can figure out what type of content works best for your audience throughout that, like those 5 pieces. So like ironically what we have found works really well is doing a carousel
Mhm.
that has videos in it actually performs better for us than most reels actually perform.
Mm.
And it's very weird. It's only data. I'm just looking at the data to pull that
Right.
that fact out, but that's not what I would have expected. But that's typically how it has worked out for us. So it's really interesting. Like that's one of the things I love about social media is that the game is constantly changing. Like filmmaking. As much as I love filmmaking, the rules have been about the same forever. The tech has pretty much been about the same. Like, yeah, we're slightly better quality, but like we're still telling the same stories. It's like Pocahontas is Avatar. Like, let's
Mhm.
not pretend it's not. You know what I mean? So like it's the same stuff, but I feel like in social media, the game is constantly changing, which for me allows me to kind of like scratch that itch in my brain where it's like, ooh, something new, something different. I can try something. I can test this platform. Let's see what happens when I post 6 times. Does that break it? No,
Yeah,
that didn't. Okay, let's post 10 times. Did that break it? Okay, it did. All right, so now we know what we're playing. I like that a little bit. It's a little
I
bit of a
love
game.
that. Well, and just another example too, Harry Potter is just Star Wars with magic.
Yeah, like I mean, so for me, it's like and don't get me wrong, I love movies. I'm gonna keep making them,
Yeah.
but social media is a different game that filmmaking is not. And so when filmmaking kind of when I start to like lose a little interest, or I finish a big project and I'm like in a lull, it's like okay, cool, we can go play the social media game for a little while, and then when it's time to get back in my filmmaking bag, I hop back over.
Well, and there's a whole more rabbit holes we can go into. I love this. It's like catnip. That's why I love this show. So we get to talk shop as creators. And I had some creators on my other show, but that would only be maybe a third of the conversation, a fourth of the conversation. And so that kind of excitement that we get when we're talking about our fields, it's like I wanted to have more of that. And so that's why I created this show. When it comes to platforms, I feel like when Opus came out, I had already had around 110, 120 interviews. And so by the time I repurposed all of them, I ended up having like 1,600 clips and I needed to get them all out. So the reason why I was doing 10 per day was because I was trying to catch up to my current place where I'm
Oh
at
yeah.
now. And so that's why I'm like, even though it's not necessarily ideal when it comes to the algorithm, it is ideal when it comes to just trying to catch up to where I want to be. So it's just kind of
Yeah.
interesting with that.
Yeah, we have a similar issue, but we just decided like because I didn't want to overly flood, we just post those on the weekends. So
Mm.
we didn't post anything on weekends, and now weekends are like just our sort of our back catalog of older episodes, and so we have those coming out. I think like 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, something like that.
Well, and one thing I found the hard way is that there's no easy way to bulk upload. So even if you want to do 3 a day or 1 a day, uploading 60 at a time is really difficult. Most social media management tools, you have to either use the CSV method, which is pretty archaic at this point, or
Yeah.
doing one at a time. There's a few tools I've come across, and Repurposed is trying to build that feature for me specifically. But Publer's what I was using in the past, and what I found out is TikTok's multi-upload is kind of slow and really glitchy. And then I don't really care for the Facebook Meta suite when it comes to planning out reels. So the only one that really works was YouTube, and I found that I care most about YouTube when it comes to uploading the short form content consistently. And so I've been doing the other platforms, including Pinterest too, by the way. Pinterest has been really interesting with short form video. But then
Mm.
YouTube, I've just been doing it manually on the actual YouTube uploader. And that has been really interesting how separating syndication versus YouTube.
Yeah, and that's sort of the same process we have. We bulk upload everything to YouTube, and then like I said, from there we're going to figure out what works well.
Hmm.
The best part about our content, because of the way we try to film it and the way we try to hold the conversations, is that certain segments are evergreen.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter really when we post the vertical short. It can go up, right after the episode, or it can go up 6 months later. And the nice thing about shorts is once the long form is up, the short can come out whenever, and that person
Hmm.
can always go back and watch the long form later. And so, that allows our long form content to sort of have a longer shelf life. And we actually find that like sometimes it's better to post the shorts later because the video will naturally get a boost from it coming out and the original audience like gravitating to it, and then that helps the algorithm push it. And then like when it actually starts to taper off a little bit, we can send a bunch more traffic by posting the shorts later.
Hmm.
And then that brings a bunch of new eyeballs. That tells the algorithm, no, 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 people still care about this. And then the algorithm can continue to push it out. So that's just a few different ways that we try to, strategically work within the system.
That's a great golden nugget right there. And one thing that was making me think of too when you're talking about YouTube versus the other socials is that there's the shotgun approach and the sniper approach, which is something we talk about a lot on this show, either being super optimized or super well focused on just making a perfect post as best as possible, or just taking the wide range and seeing what sticks. And it's kind of nice on the YouTube. What you're doing is more of the shotgun where you're experimenting, seeing what works. And then with like TikTok and Instagram, you're focusing on just like that sniper approach and just getting the best ones on there. And that way you get the best of both worlds too, I feel like.
Yeah, but we're not guessing with our
Mhm.
sniper approach on those platforms. We're taking the data that we get from
Exactly.
YouTube, and then we can sort of cheat. So instead of like, if you have a hour long podcast and you're only going to post 3 shorts from it, instead of guessing what people resonate with, we use YouTube to basically give us that data. And then cuz like YouTube gives more data than any of the other platforms. Like cuz we don't just look at views either, because
Hmm.
with short form, nobody picks to watch most of the reels or short form videos they watch. They're served. So like the views to us don't really matter. What we look at is swipe away. Like YouTube will tell us like this percentage of people swiped away from this video when it popped up, or they will tell us the actual like retention graph and show us that in shorts. Instagram has sort of that, TikTok has sort of that, but like nobody gives as much data as YouTube does on
Hmm.
a vertical piece of content. And so we really get a chance to like tell how good is this piece of content before we decide, okay, this is going to be the section that we're going to use on the other platforms.
Fantastic. And we talked about the software tools you use. What about hardware? What are you enjoying when it comes to hardware?
Oh man, I'm down the rabbit hole right now. I am so deep down the rabbit hole. I'm like in the middle of it. Before this call, I was in it. After this call, I'm going to go right back in it. I mean,
Let's
right
explore
now
then.
we have cameras everywhere. We're testing out different microphones, like the Shure SM7Bs for our podcast. We got Stream Decks everywhere. Elgato has so much of my money at this moment. Like I said, I'm on the teleprompter right here. I got a Stream Deck. I got one Stream Deck here. I got a second Stream Deck here. I got another one on the floor because it's a paddle that lets you switch cameras with your feet. Dude, I'm so deep. It's a mess right now. But I mean, for me, like I'm a gearhead. I just
Mhm.
am. That doesn't mean you have to have all the same gear that I have. I'm all about systematizing the process. And so for me, gear really is just a tool. And I use that tool to help systematize everything that we're doing. So if it comes to like switching camera angles between me and my guests, or if we want to have bumpers, or we want to have lower thirds, having a stream deck where I can press a button and then
Mhm.
boom, that lower third pops up. It is actually saving us so much time in post that then means it allows us to get out more content. We can get it out quicker. And I end up saving money in post production. And, as somebody who has been doing video production for a really long time, I can typically tell you that on average, the biggest bottleneck for most creators is post production.
Mm,
Like, there is one that is getting started. That's a door. That's not a bottleneck. There's a door. You either open it and walk through it or you don't, right? That's getting started. But once you actually get started, what slows most people down is they either edit really slow, they can't afford to hire an editor, or they just like they overly like try to make the edit perfect, and then they
mm,
get self-conscious and it doesn't go out. But at the end of the day, it's still all post-production that slows down everything. And so for me, especially with the podcast and with most of my content, I try to get it as good as it can be in camera. Like when we live stream, because like we live stream our podcast, I want that finished product to be ready to be sent out. And so if that means better audio, better cameras, lighting, like I mean, you can see I got lights all over this studio. Like
mhm.
my office, even to a certain extent, like has everything is set up. Like all these lights in here are all controlled on my phone. So I use Aperture or Amaran, and I use the Link app on my phone. That allows me to control all of this. It's all preset. So like in a moment, I can walk in my office, sit down, cameras are mounted to the wall,
Oh,
literally, and I can start recording a podcast with a guest that's either here in person or they can be virtual. And I have like this teleprompter so I can look at the guest and have a whole conversation. So for me, the
yeah.
gear is really just about systematizing the creative process. So I can go from ideation to creation and then simplify post production as quickly as I can.
That's a very good point there, Brandon. And one thing I heard you say on the Year Side Chat podcast was you had a separate camera for your recording and for actual clients. That way you didn't have to keep tearing it down and setting it back up because that hurdle would make you not want to make content if you had that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for me, the when you do video production full time, you have gear for that, right?
Mhm.
But the problem for me was like if my camera was in a case because I had to go shoot something for a client, I probably wasn't going to make content for myself.
Yeah.
And so I really had to like split my business and even split my gear, which I know is a financial hurdle that can be difficult. And so I tell people do it slowly as you
Mhm.
can. But like by splitting those two things, it allowed me to like when you have that inspiration to create something and you don't have to set anything up to do it,
Yeah.
you're just going to make it, right? You're going to make it really quickly. But when you have to set up your microphone and set up your lighting and then dial in the settings and all of that, like everything here is ready to go. Like my lights, I press a button, I say I'm doing like this here, I'm shooting on the Nikon Z8. I'll say like, okay, give me the Z8 lighting setup. And that's this setup. But if I'm sitting in this chair that's over here and I'm looking at the camera that's mounted on that wall over there, I'll say, give me the chair A-roll setup. And then my lighting changes in my studio space because it knows what I'm setting up for. And then I can just go. That is something that, definitely takes time and knowledge and whatever to accomplish. And I definitely didn't get here overnight. But, if you can have that mindset, it also helps you to buy the right pieces of gear as you go. So as I
Okay.
said, all my lights are Amaran. So as I slowly add more lights to my kit, I make sure that I stay inside the Amaran family. So that way I can continue to control everything on my phone.
Makes it easier. Man, so many things I want to bounce off of there. For one, I managed to get a Logitech Litra light bar just this week off of Marketplace for like 35 bucks, which is, a third of the price normally. So if you use Marketplace and sometimes you can barter for trades and stuff like that, you can find some really great gear. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is that my last interview I had on this show, I was using natural lighting, which was really good. It made it look kind of nice. I had the curtain open even right now, but it kept changing like dramatically throughout the call to the point where the actual recording was hampered because of it. And so the editing process took a lot longer. And so I made sure that this time I had a light going on so it's nice and consistent. It may not be the perfect setup. I'm a little bit flush and that kind of thing. ISO is probably a little bit messed up on the camera. I'm still getting used to it. Point is, though, the lighting's a lot better. It's going to stay consistent. It won't mess up the quality of recording. And then the other thing was you were talking about the bottlenecks, and something you mentioned really resonated with me because it is my bottleneck. there's 4 steps to the podcasting there's 4 steps to the podcasting process. There is the like preparation, so the research and all that jazz, the actual call itself, the recording. So I try to orchestrate this conversation as much as possible to help make sure you get as much time to share different ideas and answer the questions as in the way that you feel best. And sometimes we might go back to an old topic to circle back on that. And then there's the editing process and the marketing process. And when I would do all these different interviews, I would burn out by the time I got done with editing that I would not market very much. And it was
Mhm.
mainly just procrastination. I'm decent at editing. I just can't stand doing it. It's not a process I enjoy, especially since DaVinci Resolve kept crapping out on me over the years. But point is, that was my bottleneck. And I finally found an editor that was cheap enough for me to afford, especially since that person's still starting out. And it's just one of those things where it's helped me a ton on that process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the best investments I ever did was, hiring an editor. The only thing I'll tell most people is hire an editor sooner than you think you do. Like, if you don't enjoy the editing process, like, I mean, when you start making your first bits of money and you can't, like, hire them. And even sometimes, like with editing, some people think, like, oh, I got to spend thousands of dollars for an editor. Sometimes you just need somebody who can like polish your video,
Mhm,
right? So like if you can just do like this is what I used to do with my editor was I would get the selects because that part wasn't hard. Like cleaning, like grabbing the A roll and grabbing the selects and all that. I could do that, match my audio and everything, get that in a timeline. And then I'd send the timeline off to him, and then he would add the graphics and clean it up and all that stuff. Because that was the stuff that took a lot of the time. But
mhm.
with the time that I gained back by giving him the edit, I then went and worked on something else that would drive in more revenue for the business. And so being able to do that and even like systematize out your edit if you can't afford somebody to fully just take on the whole thing is a way you can at least get started, or vice versa. If you really like to make sure the video is yours, because I know a lot of creators, I mean, I've moved on from this, but
Mhm.
like a lot of creators are like, oh, I can't give the edit away because then it won't be mine. It's like, well, then let them do the selects, let them do the pre-edit, and then they've done all of the tedious work. And then you can go in and be creative if you want to do that. But either way, if it can help you, get rid of that process, like whatever's slowing you down, figure out a solution. And then, if it's going to cost a little bit, just figure out how you can make it work.
That's some great advice there. I think MKBHD is a good example where I think he still edits a decent amount of the videos on that channel because I see he wants to be part of that process kind of thing.
Right, and that's not a bad thing,
Yeah.
like, even though I'm on camera for a lot of my videos, I am very particular about, like, the shots, like, and that's
Mm.
because my filmmaker brain, and so, like, even when I'm shooting BTS, like, or we're shooting BTS, I will, like, have like, if someone needs to get a shot of me, I will have them stand in, I will get the exact shot that I want with them in it, and then I'll hand them the camera, I'll stand in, I'll be like, "Alright, give me that exact same shot of me doing it." Because I'm very particular because I like
Yeah.
that part of it. So if you like a certain part of it, that's okay. But like then maybe for you it's the marketing side. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, posting on social media. I'm burned out by the time I get to the posting on social media part. Well, then just try to bring somebody in who can do that part for you. So that way you can keep it going.
Like for me, I love the research phase. I love digging through your channels and then figuring out like what questions can I ask based on that. And one question that even though it's pretty recent, so it's not like I dug too deep for it. What's the story behind the Empire counter and the LED wall? Because I was curious about that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I love, I'm a filmmaker. Recently, we just did a Star Wars film and we released it on May the 4th because I'm a Star Wars nerd. Um, and I have a friend out here in Houston who recently just got an LED wall, which is basically the same type of wall that they use to shoot The Mandalorian. And so as a filmmaker and as a gearhead, as I said already, I love just the technology that goes into filmmaking. And so I was like, hey, if you're going to let me shoot on this LED wall, let's make something amazing. And so we wanted to shoot something that was very, very similar to Star Wars. And so we made a Mandalorian short film. It was a lot of fun. What I love is I've gotten so many messages from people that were like, "Whoa, you worked on The Mandalorian?" And I was like, "No."
No.
I was like, "No, it's not The Mandalorian, but I'm glad it was so good that you thought it was." So that means a lot to me. But, my dreams in like filmmaking is to make movies that are in theaters. Like
Mhm.
I have this dream and like I mean, I don't care if anybody believes it or not, but like for me, I have a dream of seeing my movie premiered at the Grove. like as this the same theater I grew up in as a kid and going to in Los Angeles. I want to go see my own movie at the Grove, and I want to take my grandmother there, which means, I know that's a ticking clock, and like I know that means I got to get on my horse, and I want to go and
Mhm.
do that. And so for me, those are the things that sort of like motivate me to keep moving forward. But yeah, like doing the Star Wars thing was sort of like my way of like slowly telling Hollywood or like trying to get it shopped out there. Cause like I said, I'm actually going out to Los Angeles next week for City Gear. And so I'll be out there and I'll get a chance to talk to a few people. And I'm like, hey, look, I can shoot some stuff
Come
if
on
you
now,
help
guys.
me make something. Like, hey, let's go. So I definitely believe that like if you want the job, you got to do the work before you can get the job. And
Mm.
so for me, I wanted to show people that like, hey, this is what we can make with 2 days of production, about a month of total work in post. Like, this is what I'm capable of making with like this much resources.
Mhm.
If I actually get the resources I need, we can make something even better. And so that was my goal with that project.
I love that, and I love the whole story you shared too about what your goal is too. That is one of those things where I think that a lot of people who are passion driven, they don't always share their passions, and sometimes it's really good to get that off your chest and be able to share it with the world and put it out in the world
Yeah.
to manifest it too.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Actually, I think that's an exclusive. I don't even think I've ever shared that before. So that's yours.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's one thing I love about these conversations too, is that if you can make the guests feel comfortable and open up, we can have those nice deep moments together. And I'm excited to now. Makes me want to keep an eye out for when you do make that production, like high production movie with the, studios out in Hollywood and all that jazz.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
So kind of a similar idea. Can you share one of your favorite stories that's happened to you as a content creator?
Ooh, favorite stories. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could tell you about like just like the crazy world of being a content creator and like the doors that can open up, because this all happened again. This is like, I mean, when you asked me the question about 5 years ago, what I thought was possible versus what has actually been possible, like the last 5 years have been nuts with just
Mm.
opportunities. And so, like, as a filmmaker, there are so many camera brands that you can dive into, but there have been like two big ones that have been like really big in the filmmaking space. And one is Ari, and the other is a company called Red. And as a filmmaker and as like a kid who was like growing up and eventually found out what Red was, and I saw movies that were shot on Red, I was like, oh my gosh, one day I want to be able to own a Red camera. And like that was the dream. The dream was just to own a Red camera. Well, through years of hard work and video production and growing my business and everything else, I finally was able to buy a Red camera. And of course, because I'm excited about it, I start sharing that on social media. And
Mhm.
I share it on YouTube, I share it on Instagram and all these different places. And I'm just sharing my thoughts on the camera. Well, funny enough, the CEO at the time, Jared Land, he sees my video and he shares it on his Facebook page when I
Hey.
got my Raptor in and I unboxed it and I was telling everybody how excited I was about it. And he shared it, and dude, I was driving when it happened, and like I was trying so hard not to swerve my car off the road because I was so excited. I was like, "Oh my gosh, he knows who I am." Like literally that was my mindset. Well, fast forward a few months, I'm just living my life, doing my thing. That was a moment in time. And then Jared himself actually emails me and he goes, "Hey, got a project idea I think you might be interested in." And I was like, first of all, I'm so glad you got my email, but like, yeah, absolutely. Like, love to chat. And basically he talked to me about a project where they wanted to follow a creator and have that creator talk about their process of using the Red camera.
Mm.
And it was in a collaboration with B&H, and it was going to be posted on B&H's website, the whole nine. Well, fast forward a few months later, and I got a chance to shoot a project with Red for B&H to really showcase their cameras. And now I'm actually going to be flying out to Los Angeles. Like I said, next week, I'll be actually speaking on Red's behalf at an event in Los Angeles. And that just goes to show like how crazy this world of being a content creator is that like, in no other field do I think, you can have these crazy dreams and just have stuff happen and be manifested and just have happen in your life by just posting a video online. Like literally the way I look at content creation now is that like every video I put out there almost opens the door for crazy opportunities and crazy dreams to be reached. And now, from being a kid who just dreamed of owning a Red camera to now being a guy who actually gets a chance to work with this brand and sort of align myself with them even further has been absolutely amazing. And so that's just to hopefully give people, some inspiration to let them know, like, if you are aspiring to be a content creator and there's some crazy dream out there that you have that nobody believes in, but you do, keep striving for it, because being a content creator, I can honestly say, has definitely opened up doors that I never thought would be opened, but I'm really glad they are.
I mean, when we first met in person, it was at the NAB show, and it was one of those things where that door for me even being there was because I created content. And so I get what you're saying there when it comes to I did a whole bunch of interviews without really any progress. Like nothing really happened for a couple years. Eventually, these repurposing tools came out. I obsessed over them because I love different software tools. Eventually, I found a tool that helped me repurpose it all. Through that tool, I was able to go to a conference and see more people like us. And so definitely it takes time, but sometimes it pays off really well, like you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does. It's totally worth it.
Kind of moving on here. What brought about Creative Fam Academy?
Yeah, so Creative Film Academy is my online platform. It's basically where we teach filmmaking. Originally, it was built because I had all these different courses that I was selling, and I wanted to just put it into one place to make it easy for everybody, and then offer it as a membership opportunity.
Mhm.
Partnered with a company called Uscreen in order to actually create it. And it's been awesome because Uscreen makes it super, super easy to just like upload your content on there, and then your people have access to it. And then the biggest selling point for me was the fact that you could also build it into an app on your phone
Yeah.
to make it very easy for your viewers to be able to access it. And so like the Creative Film Academy is an app. It's in the App Store, it's in the Google Play Store. You can download it if you're looking to grow your filmmaking knowledge. But the thing that really has been the thing I love the most about it is the community aspect of it. So with Uscreen, they allow you to also have your own community page with it. And so you can actually have your own tabs, like you
Mhm.
can have different sections. And some can be free, some can be paid. You can kind of set it up however you want to, but it gives your audience a place to go for community. And so for me, it was like kind of a Patreon, but like 100 times better.
Yeah.
And I could customize it. I could make it my own. And of course, as a video guy, Uscreen is very video centric. And so it just made it to be a really cool platform to build on. And so we continuously are trying to grow it and build it and just keep making it better.
I love that, and that's one I want to mention. Like when I ask what tools do you use, I kind of thought you might mention Uscreen. Because when I was scrolling through that page, I was like, this looks like a Uscreen website, I think. And because I remember actually when Uscreen kind of came out, and I looked into them. I think for me, I wasn't able to afford the pricing plans, but I think it pays off in the end because you end up getting more people paying for the different courses and membership. And there's some interesting things about it. Like you made the Google Play app and Apple Store app, and then on top of that, down the line, I think you could also do like Roku and Fire TV apps too, so get over the air. It's really cool what you can do with Uscreen. Shout out to Rob over at Uscreen.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to Rob. Rob's legit.
Well, and then on top of that too, you're talking about your podcast earlier, and I was curious. This is one question I think kind of slipped away was what tool do you use to record your podcast?
So we use Ecamm
Okay.
to do all of our stuff with the podcast when it comes to software. Now, we recently just switched from StreamYard, I think it was. So yeah, we had StreamYard. So we are 3 weeks in at the time of recording this podcast.
Mhm.
We're 3 weeks in on using Ecamm, and I'm loving it. It is the reason why I've gone down the rabbit hole with all the gear. Because there's so much you can do with it, and you can really customize your show and make it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you could put on something that is like television quality
Mhm.
with inside of Ecamm. I mean, you can stream in 4K, which is amazing. You can have tons of on-screen animations, graphics, background music, sound effects. You can bring in guests, and you can you can customize it so much. So Ecamm is a lot of fun. I'm really, really enjoying it. Like I said, we're just a few weeks in on it, and I'm having a great time playing with it and seeing more of what it has to offer. Like I said, we've been doing it since December-ish, doing the live stream, doing the podcast, and really finding our show's flow.
So, after a little bit of technical difficulties, I have you back here. What do you have coming down the line that you are excited for?
Oh man. Right now, when it comes to like stuff that we're working on going forward, as I mentioned before, our podcast has definitely taken off, and that is definitely something I'm really, really excited about right now.
Yeah.
Also, we've been making some changes to the Creative Fam Academy, which is our online platform where we teach people how to actually be able to get into filmmaking, and we go over the basics of how to shoot with a camera. But then we take it one step further and even teach you like how to turn that into a profitable business. And so right now, when it comes to the future, a lot of it is really just like, how can we continue to provide as much value as we possibly can to our audience
Right.
and really help them make some like life changing or create some life changing momentum through the content that we make on my channel, but then also the stuff that we're putting in the Creative Fam Academy. So, I mean, we've got some pretty interesting stuff coming on there, including, I guess you'll be hearing it here first. We're going to have a free tier that we're launching on that as well, just to make it even more accessible to those, because we just understand
Mhm.
that there's just a lot of people out there who want to get into this and it can be very difficult at the beginning. And so we just want to make that process even easier.
I love that, and thanks for making it easier because I was that kind of person when I was still starting out. I still kind of am even at this stage, and being able to like step forward and have a little bit of progress just because you have that free tier. On top of that, too, I was checking that out, and there was a lot of things you offer on there too. There's a whole variety of different courses and different things you talk about. I'm excited for you at the podcast as someone who has a couple podcasts myself, as obviously I enjoy this kind of world, and there's so much great things you can talk about on a show like a podcast that you can't always do on a regular video series. And so I'm really happy for you.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. Doing podcasts, even as someone who's been in doing video production for, close to 10 years total, it is a different world. Podcasting is definitely a different world. But the thing I like about it is, like you said, you get a chance to have conversations that would be difficult to have in just a normal video kind of setting. And a podcast just allows you to be more open, more honest, and actually give yourself and the audience time to actually understand what it is that you're saying.
Right. And as a video production kind of person, do you have any particular insights as like from your point of view, making a podcast, like when it comes to maybe viewing angles or just production quality, like anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I believe that the visuals are always important. So I probably overly think about it. I mean, I think internally we joke about we spend all these hours of time like setting up lights and all this stuff for people just to like tap on our podcast and then lock their phone and put it in their pocket and never look at us. But I
Right.
think that like for us, we have found success by posting our podcast specifically on YouTube.
Mhm.
We got our podcast YouTube channel, specifically our podcast YouTube channel, monetized in about 2 months. And we were able to do that because we were taking clips plus the long version plus shorts. And we were able to post that all onto YouTube and let the YouTube algorithm really help find our audience. Where I feel like if you just take just the audio version and you throw it up on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or something like that, it's going to probably be harder for you to be able to get that audience. And so what we found was that by focusing on YouTube first, we were able to really grow our podcast. We're now monetized. So the podcast is actually bringing in money, not a lot right now, but it's at least a first step. And it also, for us, we found that like brands are willing to get involved as well already. So like things like that, I feel like are specifically very YouTube and very video, which is very helpful. Which I feel like if we just went audio only with our podcast from the start, we probably wouldn't see quite as much success already.
Not as much discoverability on those audio platforms either.
Yeah, and so that was a big one for us. I mean, with thumbnails and things like that, you just get more opportunities. And when you can cut down into clips and post those, most podcasts are like an hour long, maybe a little longer. But you get one title, one thumbnail, one opportunity to get somebody's attention. Versus if you can take your podcast and turn it into individual video clips, that gives you, 4, 5, 6 chances to bring in somebody with the same piece of content. So it's a little bit more of a return on your time when it comes to actually creating the podcast.
I definitely want to shout out Opus Clip with that there too. I found myself using actually more than just six. I get a little excessive. I do like 12
Clips or
episodes.
shorts?
The short
Okay,
clips.
yeah, yeah. So the way we break it down is we have full episodes, Then we have what we call
Mhm.
clips, which are horizontal, anywhere between 6 to 15 minutes. And then we have our shorts. And
Yeah.
so when I say like after a podcast or an episode, we will have like 4 to 6 clips, and then we will have 12 to 15 shorts. And we're just like posting those all on that channel, which has just allowed us to have a really, really wide net to start to find our audience and also to figure out what our audience is really interested in.
I love that breakdown. And the clips, are you posting those on the podcast channel or a separate clips
No,
channel?
all on one channel right now. We believe that it's better to just drive all the eyeballs, all the attention to one
Mhm.
YouTube channel before we like start diversifying it too much. Like let the audience tell us like, hey, this is too many clips on one channel, or we need one
Mhm.
place for the full and another place for the clips. But right now, I mean, the audience is smart enough. I mean, they'll know the difference between the full version, which we could either put on the thumbnail, which we do, we'll put full, or we actually put clips on the clips version, but they can also just tell by the length of time. And so that's what we do right now, all on one channel. It's working really good.
I love that. And I honestly am in the same boat where I think that putting it all on the same channel is wiser. I think always splitting it off like that puts you into like spreading yourself too thin
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, absolutely. Like I said, especially when you're just getting started. If you've been around for a
Mhm.
while, maybe, like if you're like somebody like as big as like a Joe Rogan or something, that makes sense to split it. But for most cases, I think, just put it all on one channel, you'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, Brandon, if people want to find you, where can they find you online?
At Bwash Media everywhere. So that's Threads, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. And then you can find our uncensored podcast everywhere. Just look up uncensored, and that's spelled with an S, uncensored, like a camera sensor.
I'll have links in the description for you there. And I like how you put threads first.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's just, I don't know. I've been using it a lot more. I find that it's a great
Mhm.
place. I guess for me right now when it comes to like social media, I like testing stuff. And so I find that testing stuff on Threads, I can test as much as I want and it doesn't hurt me. And then I use that information to trickle down into other pieces of content, just like with YouTube Shorts. I can test a lot of YouTube Shorts right now, figure out which ones do really well, and then kind of like repackage those and then put them on other platforms. So right now I'm in a very heavy testing phase for the content and just putting out as much as I can.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the results from those tests. And thank you for coming on the Creator Spotlight.
Dude, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's Brandon and Dustin. Thank you guys.